Nobody expected a car accident to expose 17 years of lies. I'm Landon Turner, and for 17 years, I thought I was living the American dream. Devoted father, working double shifts to fund my son's Harvard education. Proud husband, supporting my wife's academic ambitions. The quiet guy who never complained, never caused drama, never asked for credit. I pushed mop handles while my family reached for the stars. But that BMW crash on Highway 183 changed everything. My wife, Rebecca, needed emergency surgery. Standard medical procedures, routine tests that should have been routine. Instead, those test results revealed something that made me question everything I'd believed about my family. The documents I found afterward were even worse. If you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know where you're watching from, especially if you've ever been underestimated because of your job. Because what Rebecca and her university friends didn't know about their simple janitor was about to destroy the perfect little world they'd built on my back. Let me tell you how I turned 17 years of betrayal into the most satisfying graduation ceremony in Texas history. For 17 years, I lived as a ghost in my own family. Every parent-teacher conference, Rebecca went alone. Landon's working, she'd tell the other parents. Truth was, I'd offered to take time off. Every single time. You wouldn't understand the academic discussions, she'd say. Let me handle the intellectual stuff. Brandon's achievements covered our refrigerator. National Honor Society, Math Olympiad gold medal, perfect SAT scores, Harvard early admission. In every photo, every certificate, every newspaper article about our gifted son, I was invisible. At his 16th birthday party, I brought out the cake I'd spent 4 hours decorating. Batman theme, just like when he was 6. Brandon looked at it like I'd brought roadkill. Really, Dad? Batman? I'm not a child. His friend snickered. Rebecca jumped in fast. Landon's sweet, but he doesn't really get teenage culture. She ruffled my hair like I was the kid. He means well. The worst part? I believed her. See, I dropped out of college at 23 when Rebecca got pregnant. Full ride to Stanford, PhD track in educational psychology. Gone. Overnight, I became a janitor at the University of Texas to pay bills. Rebecca could finish her degree, pursue her dreams. Our son would have opportunities I'd sacrificed. You're so noble, she'd say, giving up everything for family. But noble felt different when your own son introduced you as my mom's husband at school events. The pattern started early. Brandon's first word wasn't Dada. Rebecca made sure of that. When he took his first steps, I was working overtime to pay for his private preschool. When he lost his first tooth, I was installing new flooring in the professor's lounge, where Rebecca spent her study sessions. By middle school, Brandon stopped asking me to help with homework. Mom's the smart one, he'd say. She actually went to college. Rebecca would smile apologetically. Kids say the darndest things. But she never corrected him. High school made it worse. Brandon played varsity tennis. I never missed a match, standing alone in the bleachers, while other parents chatted in their polo shirts and designer jeans. Rebecca sat with the university crowd, professors, administrators, doctorate holders, the intellectual elite. There's Landon, I'd hear her explain. Brandon's father, he does maintenance at the university. Very hardworking. The pause before very hardworking said everything. Last Christmas, Brandon gave Rebecca a first edition copy of The Bell Curve for $300. He gave me a $15 gift card to Home Depot. For your tools, he said, not making eye contact. I thanked him anyway. Our family photos told the story. Rebecca and Brandon, both tall, both brunette, both with those sharp academic features. Then me, shorter, sandy-haired, blue-collar, broad shoulders. I looked like the hired help who'd accidentally wandered into the family portrait. But I loved them. God help me, I loved them both. I worked 60-hour weeks cleaning laboratories where professors conducted research I could have authored. I mopped floors in lecture halls where visiting scholars discussed theories I'd developed in graduate school before Rebecca needed me to step up and be practical. Every overtime hour went into Brandon's college fund. Every weekend I could have relaxed. I spent installing new kitchen cabinets or fixing Rebecca's car or driving Brandon to academic competitions 3 states away. I told myself it was temporary. That someday, when Brandon graduated Harvard, when Rebecca finished her master's degree, when the financial pressure eased, someday they'd see my worth. Instead, they saw a convenient doormat. The night before the accident, at dinner, Brandon announced his Harvard acceptance. Full scholarship plus a $15,000 annual stipend. Rebecca cried with joy. They hugged. They celebrated. I said, "I'm proud of you, son." Brandon looked at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. "Thanks," he said. Then to Rebecca, "Can you believe it, Mom? I actually made it out." Out. Like our family was a prison he'd escaped. I should have known then that something was wrong. The morning after Brandon's Harvard announcement, I did something I'd never done before. I checked our family bank accounts. 17 years of blind trust evaporated in 37 seconds. The college fund we'd started when Brandon was born, $180,000, built from my overtime hours, my weekend work, my skipped lunches, and delayed medical checkups, showed a balance of $23,000, $157,000. Gone. I pulled up the transaction history with shaking hands. Monthly transfers, always the same amount, always to the same external account. An account owned by Dr. William Blackstone, professor of economics, department head. Rebecca's academic mentor. The transfers started 3 years ago, right when Brandon began high school. Right when his exceptional academic performance suddenly required specialized tutoring and enrichment programs. I'd never questioned it. Rebecca handled all educational expenses. She understood academic investment strategies. I just worked harder to keep the deposits coming, but $157,000 for tutoring? That was more than most people's annual salary. That was more than I'd made in 4 years of janitor wages. I cross-referenced the dates with Rebecca's calendar. Every transfer occurred the day after she'd spent a weekend at academic conferences or department retreats. The same conferences where Dr. Blackstone was keynote speaker, the same conferences where spouses weren't invited because they were intensive professional development. My hands found a folder labeled Brandon's Academic Records in Rebecca's desk. Inside, acceptance letters, scholarship notices, recommendation letters, all signed by Dr. William Blackstone as family friend and academic advisor. Family friend. I'd never heard his name before this week. The scholarship letter hit different now. Brandon Turner has demonstrated exceptional promise under my personal guidance, Dr. Blackstone wrote. His mother and I have worked closely to develop his intellectual potential. His mother and I, not his parents, not his family, his mother and I. I found Brandon's Harvard application essay titled Overcoming Economic Disadvantage. He wrote about growing up with a single working mother who pursued education despite financial hardship. He described watching his mother sacrifice her social life to provide intellectual stimulation he couldn't get at home. Single working mother. I wasn't even a footnote in his Harvard admission story. But the real gut punch came in the financial aid section, listed under household income, $47,000. Listed under family assets, $23,000 in savings, $47,000. That was Rebecca's part-time university job. My $52,000 janitor salary didn't exist in Brandon's academic world. They'd written me out of his future. I sat in my truck outside the bank, staring at withdrawal slips that represented every birthday I'd worked instead of celebrated, every vacation I'd skipped to pay for Brandon's summer camps, every Christmas gift I'd foregone to keep his college fund growing. $157,000 stolen. My son didn't know I existed in any meaningful way. My wife had been lying about academic conferences for 3 years, and tomorrow Brandon would graduate as valedictorian of Westlake High School. The ceremony program listed Dr. William Blackstone as guest speaker. Topic: Investing in our children's future. I laughed, sitting alone in a bank parking lot at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. Then I made 3 phone calls. First, my bank, to freeze all family accounts pending investigation. Second, my lawyer, a University of Texas legal clinic graduate who owed me favors from when I'd helped his struggling mother get tuition assistance. Third, the IRS tip line to report potential educational fraud involving federal financial aid. Because if Brandon had received need-based assistance based on false information, if they'd hidden my income and assets to qualify for grants intended for truly disadvantaged families, that wasn't just betrayal. That was federal crime. The stakes crystallized as I drove home to face my fake family. If I stayed silent, I'd lose everything. My dignity, already gone. My savings, already stolen. My son, already ashamed of me. But if I spoke up, I'd lose them too. The difference was, speaking up meant I'd get to choose how I lost them. I pulled into our driveway, my driveway, bought with my credit score and down payment, and made my decision. Rebecca's car wasn't there. At 2:30 p.m. on a Tuesday, she was probably at another faculty meeting with her family friend. I walked into my house, climbed to my bedroom, and opened the closet safe that Rebecca thought contained only my tool insurance papers. Inside, my Stanford acceptance letter, my graduate record examination scores, my thesis proposal titled Socioeconomic Bias in Academic Assessment, How Class Prejudice Shapes Educational Outcomes, approved by committee, defended successfully, 22 years ago, before I became the convenient fool. Time to remind them who they were really dealing with. The call came at 3:47 p.m. Mr. Turner, this is Austin Memorial Hospital. Your wife has been in an accident. I dropped my mop. 20 years of muscle memory kicked in. Grab keys, lock utility closet, run. I'd prepared for this moment without knowing it. The moment when being a husband mattered more than being a janitor. The BMW M5 had wrapped around an oak tree on Highway 183. The officer explained that Rebecca had been unconscious, no ID, but the car registration led them to me. She's stable now, he said. Surgery went well, but we need to discuss something. The something was blood typing. We ran compatibility tests for potential complications, Dr. Sarah Chen explained. Standard procedure for head trauma cases. We need family medical history, genetic markers. Rebecca was awake but groggy when I reached her room. Bandaged forehead, bruised ribs, left arm in a sling. Landon, she whispered, thank God you're here. But 17 years of conditioning made me reach for her hand, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the smell, expensive cologne that wasn't mine. Maybe it was the way she glanced at the door nervously. What happened? I asked. I was driving home from campus. Must have fallen asleep. Her voice sounded rehearsed. You know how these academic conferences drain me. Which conference? The economics symposium. Very intense. Multiple sessions. I nodded, pulled out my phone, showed her the University of Texas website, open to current events. Funny thing, I said quietly. No economics symposium this week. I checked. Rebecca's eyes sharpened despite the medication. Maybe it was last week. I'm confused from the accident. Or maybe you were in someone else's car. The heart monitor beside her bed picked up pace. Beep, beep, beep. What are you implying? I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. The BMW that crashed? Not yours, not mine. Registered to Dr. Leach. William Blackstone, 428 Maple Street, Austin. Rebecca went very still. Dr. Chen, I called to the hallway. Could you come in here? The doctor appeared, clipboard in hand. Professional smile. Dr. Chen, my wife is having memory issues from the trauma. Could you help us with the timeline? What time did the accident occur? 3:47 p.m., according to the paramedics. And she was unconscious when they found her? Yes, for approximately 20 minutes. I turned back to Rebecca. But you called me this morning at 8 a.m., said you were leaving for your conference. 8 hours. That's a long conference for a Tuesday afternoon. Rebecca's breathing quickened. I told you, I'm confused. Let me help clear things up. I pulled out bank statements I'd printed that morning. These are interesting, recurring transfers to Dr. Blackstone's account. $157,000 a total. From Brandon's college fund. Dr. Chen shifted uncomfortably. Perhaps I should give you privacy. Actually, doctor, one more question. The blood typing you mentioned. Did you run any genetic compatibility tests? Standard DNA markers, yes, for tissue matching purposes. And the results? Dr. Chen glanced at Rebecca, then back to me. Mr. Turner, perhaps we should discuss this privately. No, right here, right now. What did you find? The genetic markers indicate, well, there's no paternal DNA match between you and the patient's emergency contacts. The room went silent except for that accelerating heart monitor. Emergency contacts, I repeated. Who are her emergency contacts? Dr. Chen consulted her tablet. She listed Dr. William Blackstone as primary emergency contact, father of her son, Brandon Turner. Father of her son. I looked at Rebecca. She was staring at the ceiling, tears sliding down her cheeks. 17 years, I said. She didn't answer. You've been planning this for 17 years. Landon, please. The college fund, the academic conferences, the way Brandon looks at me like I'm nothing. My voice stayed level. 20 years of practice controlling my emotions in the face of academic superiority. You've been stealing from me to pay for your boyfriend's son. He's your son too. You raised him. I raised a lie. I paid for a lie. I sacrificed my future for a lie. Rebecca sat up slowly, wincing. When she spoke, her voice had changed. Colder, more calculated. What future, Landon? You're a janitor. You push mop handles. Brandon has a Harvard acceptance. He's going to be somebody. And I'm nobody? You're a good man, but you're not his father. Not the way it matters. The heart monitor was beeping rapidly now. Dr. Chen stepped forward. I really think we should... What way matters, Rebecca? Intellectually, academically, Brandon needs guidance you can't provide. Because I'm too stupid? Because you're too limited. There it was. 17 years of careful politeness, stripped away by trauma medication and desperation. I stood up slowly. Dr. Chen, I need to see the DNA results. Sir, I don't think... 0% match. That's what you found, isn't it? Dr. Chen nodded reluctantly. I looked down at Rebecca. I want you to tell me one thing, just one true thing. Was any of it real? Rebecca closed her eyes. I did love you at first, but William could give Brandon opportunities you never could. So you made me pay for them. You wanted to be useful. I let you be useful. I pulled out my phone, showed her the IRS tip line number I'd called. You want to know what's useful, Rebecca? Federal fraud investigation. Brandon's financial aid was based on false information. Your boyfriend's about to lose his job, and you're about to lose everything. Her eyes went wide. You wouldn't. I already did. I walked to the door, turned back one last time. Oh, and Rebecca, that conference you're always talking about? The academic discussions I'm too stupid to understand? I wrote the textbook your boyfriend teaches from. Check the faculty library. Dr. Landon Turner, Ph.D., Educational Psychology, Stanford University. I left her there, staring after me, while her heart monitor screamed. The drive home from the hospital felt like waking up from a 20-year coma. For the first time since Brandon was born, I didn't stop at the university maintenance office to check tomorrow's work schedule. Didn't review which classrooms needed deep cleaning, which professors had special requests. Instead, I drove straight to the faculty parking lot. Spot 23, reserved for Dr. William Blackstone, Department of Economics. Empty BMW space, yellow crime scene tape fluttering in the Texas wind. I'd mopped the floors around that parking space for 8 years, watched Dr. Blackstone arrive every morning at 8:15 a.m. sharp, briefcase in hand, perfectly pressed suits that practiced academic confidence I recognized from my Stanford days. He'd never looked at me, not once. Janitors are invisible to men like him. But I'd been watching him. 8 years of observing his routines, his office habits, his teaching methods. Part of my research protocol, studying academic power dynamics from the inside. How do educators treat support staff? How does institutional hierarchy shape interpersonal behavior? Dr. William Blackstone had been my primary case study without knowing it. I parked beside the maintenance building and climbed to the second floor. My real office, the one Rebecca and Brandon knew nothing about, was tucked behind the boiler room. University storage, officially. Research sanctuary, privately. The security guard, Miguel Santos, nodded as I passed. Evening, Dr. Turner. Working late again? Something like that. Miguel was one of 3 people on campus who knew my real credentials. The others were Principal Patricia Sullivan at Westlake High, where I'd consulted on their dropout prevention program, and Chancellor Maria Rodriguez, who'd approved my undercover research project in 2018. 22 years of hiding my PhD had been surprisingly easy. People see what they expect to see. Janitor uniform equals uneducated worker. Mop and bucket equal intellectual limitation. The academic elite never questioned why their maintenance staff could fix complex laboratory equipment, or why their floras got cleaned with unusual efficiency. They never noticed I'd optimized their entire custodial operation using statistical analysis. I unlocked my filing cabinet and pulled out the thick folder labeled Blackstone Research Data. 8 years of careful documentation, his teaching evaluations, his research publications, his financial disclosures, filed annually with the university, his relationship patterns. Dr. Blackstone had a history. 3 previous academic mentoring relationships with graduate student mothers. 2 ended in divorce when the women discovered his pattern of emotional manipulation. 1 ended in a formal university inquiry that somehow disappeared from public records. But I had copies of everything. University Wi-Fi gave me access to databases most people couldn't reach. Academic journals, peer review comments, citation networks. I'd been building a profile of institutional academic fraud for my eventual dissertation, whenever I decided to return to public scholarly life. Dr. Blackstone was a serial predator who targeted vulnerable women seeking academic advancement for their children. Rebecca fit the pattern perfectly. Part-time university employee, single mother figure, ambitious but insecure about her intellectual credentials. He'd offered her social access, academic legitimacy, and the promise that her son could transcend his circumstances. The price was simple. Complete financial and emotional subordination. My phone buzzed. Text from Principal Sullivan. Landon heard about Rebecca's accident. Are you still planning to attend graduation tomorrow? I have that surprise we discussed. The surprise. Patricia had been waiting 3 months for me to give her permission. I typed back, yes, it's time. Another text, this one from Chancellor Rodriguez. Legal team is ready if you need support. Your research documentation is compelling evidence. 8 years of patient data collection was about to pay off. I pulled out my Stanford diploma and hung it on the wall next to my janitor uniform. Tomorrow, everyone would learn what 22 years of strategic patience could accomplish. But first, I had one more stop to make. Brandon would be home soon, probably celebrating his Harvard acceptance with friends, probably telling them more stories about his brilliant mother and invisible father. Time for a conversation 17 years in the making. I locked my office and drove toward my last night as the family fool. Brandon arrived home at 6:30 p.m. with 3 friends from his academic elite circle. Mason Phillips, whose father owned half of downtown Austin. Sarah Chen, daughter of 2 University of Texas professors. James Morrison, whose mother sat on the school board and whose father published economics textbooks. The kids Rebecca wanted Brandon to associate with. The future doctors and lawyers and business leaders, not the janitor's son. I was microwaving leftover pizza when they walked through the front door, loud and confident in that way only 17-year-old overachievers manage. Brandon, I called from the kitchen. How was school? Did you finish your AP chemistry lab report? The conversation in the living room stopped abruptly. Dad's home, Brandon said, like announcing a minor inconvenience. I walked out to greet his friends, wiping my hands on a dish towel. Hi there, I'm Landon, Brandon's father. You kids hungry? I was about to order some actual dinner. Mason looked at my university maintenance shirt and jeans. Oh, hey. Brandon jumped in quickly. This is Mason, Sarah, and James. They're here to work on our Harvard preparation strategy. Harvard preparation strategy? You know, Brandon said, not meeting my eyes. Academic planning, college network building, things you wouldn't really understand. James snorted. Sarah elbowed him. Try me, I said. Brandon shifted uncomfortably. Dad, seriously, we need to focus. This is important. More important than family dinner. It's not really family dinner when it's just... Brandon gestured vaguely at the microwave pizza. When it's just whatever you grab from work? Mason whispered something to Sarah. She giggled. What's funny? I asked. Nothing, Brandon said quickly. Look, Dad, maybe you could give us some space. We have serious work to do. I nodded slowly. Of course, serious work. But first, let me ask you kids something. What do your parents do? Mason straightened proudly. My father is CEO of Phillips Development Corporation. My parents are both professors, Sarah said, biochemistry and computer science. My father publishes academic textbooks, James added, economics and business. Impressive, I said. And Brandon, what does your father do? The room went quiet. Brandon's face flushed red. He glanced at his friends, then back at me. You're my stepfather, technically. Stepfather? Is that what you tell people? I tell people the truth, Brandon said, his voice getting defensive. Mom raised me. You're supportive. Supportive how? You help with bills and stuff, maintenance around the house. Brandon looked at his friends for validation. Like, he keeps things running while Mom handles the important stuff. James nodded approvingly. That's cool. Division of labor. What important stuff does your mom handle? I asked. Academic guidance, college preparation, intellectual development. Brandon was gaining confidence now, playing to his audience. She's the one with the university connections. She understands what it takes to succeed at an elite level. Elite level? Harvard level, Brandon said. Ivy League level, you know, intellectual achievement. Mason grinned. My dad says blue-collar work is honest, but it's not really thinking work. Thinking work, I repeated. Strategy, analysis, problem-solving. Brandon was fully warmed up now. Mom's been preparing me for Harvard since middle school. She knows professors. She understands academic culture. She's basically a single mother who's made sure I could transcend my circumstances. Transcend your circumstances? Yeah. Like, no offense, Dad, but I need mentors who can actually guide me intellectually. Mom found me Professor Blackstone. He's been teaching me advanced economic theory since freshman year. Sarah leaned forward. That's so smart. Getting real academic mentorship instead of just family advice. Family advice isn't enough when you're aiming for Harvard, James agreed. You need professional guidance. I stood there for a moment, watching my son, Rebecca's son, perform for his academic elite friends, watching him erase 17 years of my sacrifice with casual confidence. Brandon, I said quietly, who paid for your SAT prep courses? Mom did. Who paid for your tennis lessons? Mom handles the finances. Who paid for your laptop, your textbooks, your Harvard application fees? Brandon frowned. Mom's responsible for my education. That's her thing. I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app, showed him the college fund account. This account started with $500 when you were born. Every month for 17 years, I deposited money from my paycheck. Overtime hours, weekend work, every birthday gift I didn't buy myself, every vacation I didn't take. Brandon glanced at the screen. $23,000? That's not enough for Harvard. Look at the transaction history. He scrolled through months of withdrawals, all going to the same account. Where did the money go, Brandon? His friends were watching intently now. I don't know. Mom handles the financial strategy. It went to Professor Blackstone, $157,000, your Harvard mentor. The room went very quiet. That's impossible, Brandon said. I showed him the transfer records, date by date, dollar by dollar. Every weekend I worked instead of spending time with you. That money went to your mom's boyfriend. Every overtime hour I picked up to pay for your future. I was funding their affair. Brandon's face went white. You're lying. Your mom was in his car when she crashed today. She listed him as your father on her emergency contact forms. Mason, Sarah, and James were staring now, riveted. "That's not true," Brandon whispered. I pulled out the DNA test results Dr. Chen had given me. 0% paternal match? You're not my biological son? Brandon stared at the paper like it was written in a foreign language. "But," he started. "But what, Brandon? But I've been paying for your Harvard dreams while your real father stole my money? But I've been working 60-hour weeks while your mom convinced you I was too stupid to understand your needs?" His friends exchanged glances. This wasn't the casual family drama they'd expected. "Brandon," I continued, "you want to know about transcending circumstances? Let me tell you about circumstances. I have a PhD from Stanford University. I wrote the textbook Professor Blackstone teaches from. I've been conducting research on academic bias for 8 years, while you and your mother treated me like hired help." Brandon shook his head slowly. "That's impossible." I pulled out my Stanford diploma from my work bag, set it on the coffee table. "Dr. Landon Turner, PhD in Educational Psychology, thesis on socioeconomic prejudice in academic settings. I've been living the experiment while you've been benefiting from it." Mason's jaw dropped. "You have a PhD?" "Summa cum laude, full research fellowship. I gave it up when Rebecca got pregnant because someone had to work while she finished school." Sarah whispered, "Oh my God." Brandon looked at his friends, then back at me. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because your mother convinced me you needed better. Because I believed her when she said you deserved guidance I couldn't provide. Because I let 17 years of disrespect convince me I was actually inferior." I stood up. "Gentlemen, ladies, Brandon's Harvard acceptance was built on fraud. His financial aid application listed false income information. His recommendation letters came from a man who's been stealing his college fund. His mother has been systematically erasing me from his academic life while I paid for all of it." Brandon was crying now. "I didn't know. You didn't want to know. It was easier to believe your janitor stepfather was too stupid to matter." I headed toward the stairs, then turned back. "Oh, and Brandon, tomorrow's graduation? I'll be there, not in the audience, on the stage. Time for your classmates to meet the real Dr. Turner." I left them sitting in stunned silence, finally understanding what 17 years of quiet dignity looked like when it stopped being quiet. At 6 a.m. graduation morning, I did something I hadn't done in 22 years. I put on a suit, not the discount department store suit I wore to weddings and funerals. The charcoal gray Armani I'd bought for my Stanford doctoral defense, preserved in garment bags since 1999. It still fit perfectly. I knotted a silk tie Rebecca had never seen, polished leather dress shoes that cost more than my monthly janitor salary, and looked in the mirror at Dr. Landon Turner for the first time in 2 decades. The transformation was remarkable. Posture straightened. Confidence returned. 22 years of institutional conditioning began peeling away like old paint. My phone buzzed. Text from Principal Sullivan. "Everything ready." Bim confirmed. "You sure you want to do this?" I typed back, "It's time." Another message from Chancellor Rodriguez. "Media will be present for graduation coverage. Your research documentation has been submitted to Department of Education. Fraud investigation officially opened." The third text surprised me, from Miguel Santos, the security guard. "Saw the news about Dr. Blackstone's suspension. About time someone held him accountable. Proud of you, Dr. Turner." Word was spreading faster than I'd anticipated. I drove to Westlake High 30 minutes early. The parking lot was already filling with families in graduation ceremony attire. Proud parents with cameras and flowers, grandparents with folding chairs, siblings dressed in their Sunday best. I'd missed 17 years of these moments. Every award ceremony, every academic recognition, every parent-teacher celebration. Rebecca had convinced me I'd be out of place at intellectual gatherings. Principal Sullivan met me at the main entrance. "Landon, you look..." She paused, seeing me in my professional attire. "You look like yourself again." Patricia Sullivan was one of the few people who'd known me before my janitor years. We'd worked together on her master's thesis in 2003, Educational Inequality in Urban School Systems. She'd been waiting patiently for me to reclaim my academic identity. The board approved your request, she said. You'll present the Academic Achievement Award. Brandon's name has been removed from the recipient list, pending investigation. What about Dr. Blackstone's keynote speech? Cancelled. University suspended him yesterday evening, pending formal review. She handed me a program. Your name is listed as Dr. Landon Turner, Educational Research Consultant. We walked through hallways lined with college acceptance banners. Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Stanford. The academic elite destinations these kids had worked toward. Their entire high school careers. Brandon's name appeared on 3 different banners. Harvard, Early Admission, National Merit Scholar, Valedictorian. All achievements built on fraud. Nervous? Principal Sullivan asked. 22 years nervous, I admitted. We reached the backstage area where faculty and guest speakers gathered. I recognized several University of Texas professors, colleagues who'd known me as Landon the Janitor for nearly a decade. Dr. Amanda Foster, professor of psychology, looked up from her speech notes. Did a double take. Landon, my God, I hardly recognized you. Dr. Foster, I had no idea you were participating in today's ceremony. Are you representing the University Maintenance Union? Actually, I'm presenting the Academic Achievement Award. Her confusion was obvious. In what capacity? Principal Sullivan stepped forward. Dr. Foster, meet Dr. Landon Turner, Stanford Ph.D., Educational Psychology. You might know his research on institutional bias in academic settings. Dr. Foster's expression shifted from confusion to shock to embarrassment in rapid succession. You have a Ph.D.? I've had it for 22 years. I've been cleaning your office floors while conducting undercover research on how educational institutions treat support staff. But why? Because sometimes the best way to study academic prejudice is to experience it directly. Word spread quickly through the backstage area. Within minutes, a small crowd of faculty members had gathered around me. Professors who'd ignored me for years, administrators who'd treated me as invisible, department heads who'd never acknowledged my existence, all staring at their janitor in an Armani suit holding a Stanford Ph.D. This is extraordinary, whispered Dr. James Peterson, Dean of Liberal Arts. How long have you been conducting this research? 8 years of formal data collection, 22 years of participant observation. And your findings? I smiled. Academic institutions exhibit systematic, class-based discrimination that undermines their stated commitment to intellectual merit. Faculty members consistently underestimate the cognitive abilities of support staff, creating invisible barriers to educational advancement. Dr. Peterson looked genuinely disturbed. We had no idea you were intelligent, educated, intellectually capable. I kept my voice level. That's exactly my point. Through the curtains, I could see the auditorium filling with families, 650 seats, all occupied. Local media crews setting up cameras for live coverage of Westlake High's graduation ceremony. Brandon sat in the front row with his fellow valedictorians, wearing his black cap and gown. He kept glancing toward the audience, probably looking for Rebecca. She wasn't there, still hospitalized from yesterday's accident. He had no idea his academic world was about to collapse. Dr. Turner, Principal Sullivan announced, 5 minutes until your presentation. I straightened my tie and checked my speech notes one final time. 22 years of preparation distilled into 8 minutes of public revelation. The academic fraud evidence was clear. The financial theft was documented. The DNA results were irrefutable. But the real moment wouldn't be about fraud or theft or biological paternity. It would be about respect, about recognition, about a quiet man finally demanding to be seen for who he really was. I walked toward the stage, ready to introduce Brandon Turner's classmates to his real father. The father he'd spent 17 years being ashamed of. The father who was about to become the most talked about man in Austin. Ladies and gentlemen, parents and families, faculty and students of Westlake High School's class of 2024, Principal Sullivan's voice carried across the packed auditorium. 650 people, local news cameras, live social media streams. It is my honor to introduce our presenter for this year's Academic Achievement Award, Dr. Landon Turner, Stanford University, PhD in Educational Psychology, published researcher, and parent of one of our graduating students. The applause was polite but confused. Most people had never heard my name in an academic context. I walked to the podium wearing my Armani suit, my Stanford confidence, and 22 years of suppressed dignity. The spotlight was brighter than I'd expected. The audience was larger than it looked from backstage. In the front row, Brandon sat frozen. He was staring at me like he'd seen a ghost, which, in a way, he had. The ghost of his real father finally materialized. "Thank you, Principal Sullivan." My voice was steady, trained by years of graduate school presentations. Before I present today's award, I'd like to tell you a story about academic achievement, about what it really costs, and about what happens when people mistake quiet for weak. I paused, scanning the audience. Professors from the university, school board members, local media representatives, proud parents with their cameras ready. 22 years ago, I made a choice. I gave up my Stanford PhD fellowship to support my family. I became a janitor at the University of Texas, so my wife could finish her degree and our son could have opportunities I'd sacrificed. Brandon's face was white. He was gripping his graduation cap so tightly his knuckles showed. For 17 years, I cleaned the floors where professors conducted research I could have authored. I mopped laboratories while my son's academic achievements were celebrated by everyone except me. I was told repeatedly that I was too intellectually limited to understand his educational needs. Murmurs started rippling through the audience. Parents were glancing at each other, recognizing the setup for something dramatic. Yesterday, my wife was in a car accident. Emergency medical procedures included DNA testing for compatibility purposes. I pulled out the hospital report. The results revealed that my son, Brandon Turner, is not biologically mine. 0% paternal match. The auditorium went completely silent. Even the media crew stopped moving. Brandon was shaking now, visible tremors running through his entire body. Further investigation revealed that Brandon's biological father is Dr. William Blackstone, professor of economics at the University of Texas, the same man who has been systematically stealing from Brandon's college fund, $157,000 in total, while conducting a 17-year affair with my wife. Gasps echoed through the crowd. Camera phones appeared throughout the audience. Dr. Blackstone was suspended yesterday pending formal investigation. Brandon's Harvard acceptance is under review due to financial aid fraud. The Department of Education has opened a federal investigation into false income reporting and academic misconduct. Brandon stood up suddenly. "Stop," he whispered, but his voice carried in the dead silence. I looked directly at him. "Brandon, for 17 years, you've been ashamed of your janitor father. You've introduced me as your stepfather, your mother's husband, anything but your dad. You've told your friends I lack the intellectual capacity to guide your academic development." My voice remained calm, professional. The tone I'd learned in graduate seminars, not university maintenance meetings. "Today, I'd like your classmates to meet the real Dr. Turner." I pulled out my Stanford diploma and held it toward the audience. PhD in Educational Psychology, summa cum laude. Full research fellowship. Thesis on socioeconomic bias in academic assessment. The silence was so complete I could hear the air conditioning system humming. For 8 years, I've been conducting undercover research on institutional prejudice in higher education, studying how academic environments treat working-class individuals, how class-based discrimination shapes educational opportunities. Dr. Foster was visible in the faculty section, her face red with embarrassment. My research findings are quite compelling. Faculty members consistently underestimate the cognitive abilities of support staff. Students develop superiority complexes based on their parents' professional titles rather than actual achievement. Academic institutions systematically reinforce class-based hierarchies that contradict their stated commitment to intellectual merit. I turned back to Brandon. You, son, have been living proof of my hypothesis." Brandon was crying openly now. "I didn't know," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You didn't want to know. Knowledge would have complicated your narrative about transcending your circumstances." I addressed the audience again. This morning, the Austin American-Statesman published an article titled, "University Professor Suspended for Academic Fraud." Dr. Blackstone's research has been under investigation for fabricated data. His previous relationships with graduate students involved similar patterns of financial manipulation, and the media crews were recording everything. This would be viral within hours. Brandon Turner's Harvard acceptance was based on false financial information, fraudulent recommendation letters, and stolen funding. He claimed single-mother household status while I worked 60-hour weeks to support his education. He received need-based financial aid while his biological father embezzled his college savings. Principal Sullivan stepped forward. "Dr. Turner, perhaps we should—" "Let me finish." I pulled out a folder of financial documents, bank transfer records, phone logs, university personnel files, DNA test results. Everything is documented. Everything is legally admissible. I looked directly at Brandon one more time. "Son, you wanted academic achievement. You wanted intellectual recognition. You wanted to be someone important." I paused. "Today you're going to be famous, not for your Harvard acceptance, for being the beneficiary of one of the largest academic fraud schemes in Texas history." The auditorium erupted. Parents talking over each other, students pulling out phones, faculty members rushing toward the exits. "But here's what I really want you to understand," I said, raising my voice above the chaos. "You spent 17 years being ashamed of a man who gave up everything for your future. You chose to respect the man who was stealing from that future. You judged intellectual worth by job titles instead of actual intelligence." Brandon collapsed back into his seat, sobbing. "The real lesson here isn't about fraud or DNA or stolen money. It's about respect, about recognizing that the quiet people around you might be the smartest people in the room, about understanding that someone's current position doesn't define their ultimate worth." I closed my folder and stepped back from the podium. "Principal Sullivan, I withdraw Brandon Turner's name from academic award consideration. His achievements are built on fraud. His honors are unearned. His future is currently under federal investigation." I turned to leave, then stopped. "Oh, and Brandon, the Harvard preparation strategy you discussed with your friends yesterday? Here's some free advice. Harvard doesn't accept students who commit federal financial aid fraud, but they do appreciate intellectual honesty." I walked off the stage while the auditorium dissolved into complete chaos. 650 people. Live media coverage. Social media documentation. Brandon Turner's academic career was over. Rebecca's manipulation scheme was exposed. Dr. Blackstone's fraud was public record. And Dr. Landon Turner, the quiet janitor who'd been invisible for 22 years, was finally seen. The revenge was complete. The status reversal was absolute. But the real victory wasn't public humiliation. It was reclaiming my dignity. After 22 years of being systematically underestimated, I'd proven that quiet doesn't mean weak. It means patient. And patience, properly applied, is the most powerful force in the world. The media explosion started before I reached my car. "Dr. Turner! Dr. Turner!" Reporters chased me across the parking lot. "Can you comment on the fraud allegations? How long have you been planning this revelation? What's your response to critics who say this was cruel to your son?" I kept walking. 22 years of invisibility meant I knew how to disappear when necessary. My phone was buzzing nonstop. Text notifications, missed calls, email alerts. The graduation ceremony footage was already live on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. Graduation revenge trending on Twitter. By the time I reached home, Austin American-Statesman had published a follow-up article. Janitor with Stanford PhD exposes massive academic fraud at graduation ceremony. The story included photos of my diploma, excerpts from my research publications, and quotes from university officials confirming Dr. Blackstone's suspension. Rebecca was still hospitalized, but her sister called at 2 p.m. Landon, what the hell did you do? Rebecca is hysterical. The hospital is restricting media access. Brandon won't stop crying. I told the truth, Linda. You destroyed that boy's future. His future was built on lies. I gave him the chance to build a real one. By humiliating him in front of 600 people? By showing him what consequences look like. Linda hung up. She'd always thought I was beneath Rebecca's social status anyway. At 3:17 p.m., Harvard University's admissions office called. Mr. Turner, this is regarding Brandon Turner's early admission acceptance. We've received concerning reports about false financial information on his application. The reports are accurate. I have documentation. We'll need to review all materials. His acceptance is suspended pending investigation. Understood. 23 minutes later, the National Merit Scholarship Foundation called with the same questions. Brandon's scholarship, $15,000 annually, was frozen immediately. At 4 p.m., Chancellor Rodriguez arrived at my house with the university legal team. Landon, we need to discuss your future at the university. I poured coffee for 5 lawyers and administrators who'd never spoken to me before today. Am I fired? Actually, Chancellor Rodriguez smiled, we'd like to offer you a faculty position. Your research documentation is extraordinary. 8 years of systematic data collection on institutional bias. Your undercover methodology is groundbreaking. Dr. Amanda Foster leaned forward. We had no idea you were conducting formal research. Your observations about faculty behavior toward support staff are deeply disturbing. That was the point. We'd like you to present your findings at next month's academic council meeting, Chancellor Rodriguez continued. Full faculty presentation. Published paper in the Journal of Educational Administration. I sat back in my chair, the same chair where Brandon had called me intellectually limited 2 days ago. And Dr. Blackstone? Terminated. Federal investigators seized his computer this morning. They found evidence of research fabrication, financial fraud, and sexual harassment spanning 7 years. What about the stolen money? His assets are frozen. You'll recover the full $157,000 plus legal fees and damages, probably $200,000 total. I laughed, actually laughed for the first time in months. What's funny? Asked the university lawyer. Yesterday, I was a janitor, hoping to save enough for Brandon's textbooks. Today, I'm a faculty member with a $200,000 settlement and a son who's facing federal fraud charges. About Brandon, Chancellor Rodriguez said gently. He's 17, first-time offense. If he cooperates with the investigation and makes restitution for the false financial aid, he'll likely avoid criminal charges. But his Harvard dreams are dead. His Harvard dreams were built on fraud, but he's still intelligent, still capable of real achievement. My phone buzzed with another news alert. Westlake High valedictorian's fraud scheme exposed by janitor father with secret Stanford PhD. The story was going national. CNN, Fox News, NBC. Academic fraud, plus family betrayal, plus dramatic public revelation equaled viral gold. At 6 p.m., Brandon finally came home. He looked terrible. Red eyes, wrinkled graduation gown, completely defeated. He stood in our doorway like he wasn't sure he was still welcome. Can we talk? He whispered. I gestured to the living room where we'd had so many awkward conversations over the years. I'm sorry, he said immediately. I'm so sorry. For which part? For everything. For being ashamed of you. For not knowing. For letting Mom convince me you weren't smart enough to understand my life. I nodded. Anything else? For taking your money. For letting Professor Blackstone steal from you. For introducing you as my stepfather. He was crying again. For being a terrible son. You weren't a terrible son, Brandon. You were a manipulated son. What happens now? Now we start over, with the truth this time. Do I still have a family? I looked at this 17-year-old boy who'd spent his whole life believing he was too good for me. You have a father who loves you. That hasn't changed. Even though I'm not really your son? Biology doesn't determine family. Behavior does. What about Harvard? Harvard's gone. But there are other schools, other futures, real ones this time. Brandon nodded slowly. Will you help me? For the first time in 17 years, my son was asking for my guidance. Yeah, I said. I'll help you. 6 months later, I stand in my new office at the University of Texas. Dr. Landon Turner, Associate Professor of Educational Psychology. The nameplate feels strange after 22 years of maintenance staff. My research paper on institutional bias won the American Educational Research Association's Outstanding Publication Award. The undercover janitor study is being replicated at universities nationwide. My phone rings daily with interview requests from academics studying class discrimination in higher education. Rebecca and I divorced in October. She moved to California with her sister, far from the media attention and criminal prosecution. Dr. Blackstone pled guilty to fraud charges and received 2 years federal prison plus restitution orders. Academic career finished. Brandon enrolled at Austin Community College in January. Pre-engineering track. He's paying his own tuition with part-time work at a tutoring center. No academic fraud, no family subsidies, no shortcuts. He calls me dad now instead of stepfather, not because DNA makes us related, but because respect finally makes us family. Last week, he brought his new girlfriend to dinner. "This is my dad," he told her proudly. "He's a professor at UT. He wrote the textbook my economics teacher uses." The words hit differently this time. Respectful instead of ashamed. Accurate instead of dismissive. We're building something new. Honest conversations instead of academic pretensions. Shared experiences instead of class-based separation. Real relationship instead of financial transaction. The quiet power approach worked better than I'd imagined. 22 years of patient observation, evidence collection, and strategic silence culminated in 8 minutes of devastating revelation. Sometimes the best revenge is simply telling the truth at exactly the right moment. Brandon's learning that real achievement requires real work. I'm learning that hiding your capabilities doesn't protect anyone. It only enables their prejudices. Miguel Santos still works security at the university. Now he calls me Professor Turner, with genuine pride. Principal Sullivan nominated me for the State Education Excellence Award. Chancellor Rodriguez asks for my input on faculty hiring decisions. The janitorial staff treats me like their advocate. The professors treat me like their peer. The students treat me like someone worth listening to. But the most important change is at home, where respect flows both ways now, where quiet strength is finally recognized, where a father and son are learning what family really means. Never underestimate the quiet ones. Sometimes the person you look down on is the one collecting evidence to bring you down. And sometimes, if you're patient enough, justice finds its perfect moment. If this story resonated with you, let me know in the comments where you're watching from, especially if you've ever been underestimated because of your job. Truth has a way of surfacing, eventually,